McGurk! I love typing.
Not mess with my Google Docs, Meeksy. Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira.
I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is Lena Luthor, Boardroom or Ballroom, because
Really? She looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
No.
Helen Slater here. It's so fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
My name is Jamal Igle. I am a comic book artist and writer, and I am here at Superman Celebration because they have been trying to get me back since 2011, and I was finally able to come.
And what are your thoughts about Superman Celebration? Because it's a kind of a small town, it's a little different than other...
Yeah, but it's not, I mean... I don't mind doing smaller conventions. I do a lot of small conventions as well. But I mean, there's the fact that the town gets so into the characters of Superman. I love the atmosphere. I try to describe it to my wife before I came. It's kind of like a comic book convention and a state fair. You know, it's very unique. It's fun to see. Everybody seems to be having such a great time. I love watching.
Yeah, I always describe it to people. It's called Metropolis, but it's a lot more like Smallville.
Yeah.
So on Supergirl Radio, we always ask people what their first encounter with the character of Supergirl was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Ooh. I'm pretty sure it was a reprint of one of her early story, like one of the Action Comics stories. So it was the one where I think she's like fighting a witch or something. I can't remember. Or yeah, there's a few where she's like fighting a witch or she gets turned into a witch. You know, don't quote me, but that was like my first exposure to Supergirl as a character. Then my next exposure as a Supergirl was around the time when they were doing the movie. And she had like the 80s headband, and that was actually because I was a big Legion of Superheroes fan. So, and she would appear in Legion of Superheroes, and then one of my favorite Legion stories is the Great Darkness Saga. So, and she has such a prominent role in that story as well. So those are like my really big recollections of Supergirl, you know, prior to like getting into the industry, and then obviously like the post like burn revamp and all that other stuff.
You mentioned the Legion of Superheroes, so I'm curious, why do you like the Legion?
I always kind of saw the Legion as sort of outward bound for alien kids, I like the concept of initially the teenage versions, because I started going back and reading Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, it was like the early issues and the Adventure Comics stuff, but like by the time like I started reading seriously was around that era. It was like the Great Darkness Saga era. So like the other, it's like if you could take the Justice League and mix it with Star Wars, and Star Trek, that's what Legion of Superheroes should feel like. Ultimately, you have all these disparate characters from different worlds, different technology levels, different ideologies, and then you mix in all like the young person teenage angst and sexual tension and everything else. That I think is what makes Legion even more unique than say something like the X-Men. I mean the X-Men are bound by the fact that they're all mutants, but the Legion are bound by something bigger. They're bound by the dream. They're bound by their desire to protect the UP and to be heroes, to live up to the legacy of Superman and Superboy and Supergirl.
And what got you into art? What got you into wanting to draw?
Superman the movie. Yes. My grandfather took me to see Superman the movie when I was 5. And I immediately fell in love. And then it just seemed like everything else in my life was surrounded by comics and superheroes. And, you know, this is the 70s, so you had the Adventures of Superman on television, and then you had, like, they were showing reruns of the Filmation Superman series, and then, you know, being a 70s kid, and you said stuff like, you know, the Spider-Man TV series and the Incredible Hulk, and then on Saturday mornings you had like Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, and just reruns of Batman 66, like all of this stuff just kind of all came together and made me really want to do comics and really want to draw. I just started, like, from that moment, like everything became about art for me.
So guide me through the process of creating a comic.
If I'm just coming on as the artist, I'm usually approached by somebody, whether it's like a writer or an editor, and, you know, a discussion has to happen in the beginning usually about whether or not, because you have to feel like you're a good fit. Not every project is going to be a good fit for somebody, and I've turned stuff down that just didn't feel like a good fit for me, that I didn't think that I could bring my A game to, because I've also been in a situation where just to like have steady work going, I've taken on stuff and it just didn't work out the way that I would have wanted it to. So it always begins with a conversation. You always have to have a conversation about what the goals of the series are. If it's already a long running series, like, what can I add to it? Like, what do you need from me? If it's just like a single issue or a couple of issues, I can't, I'll do it, but it's not the same as being able to come onto a series full time and be the artist that sort of shapes and guides the look of the series. So that's where it starts. And then it's usually a conversation with the writer. Sometimes multiple conversations with the writer. Especially if it's not someone that I'm familiar with or I've worked with before, because it's just like any other creative endeavor. You have to feel comfortable with the people that you're working with, and you have to feel like you can trust them to deliver their part and build trust in them that you will give them the work that they deserve. And it's weird to put it that way, actually, but it kind of, I don't know, just kind of like the way that I feel. Like I tend to put so much of myself emotionally into what I do, and if I'm not doing that, I feel like I'm performing a disservice. So I want to feel like I'm investing my time and my energy in something that's going to be fulfilling, not just financially, but emotionally and intellectually in some cases as well.
When I've talked to comic book writers, it seems like they all write differently. They might have a script, they might have something else.
Right.
So what are you usually handed?
It depends. Like, I've worked on full scripts with like dialogue and camera directions and various precise notes, and I've worked from a one-page outline and built an entire book from it. From each sentence is a page, and I built an entire book from it. And again, it goes back to that trust thing that I was talking about before, being able to trust your creative partners and them having trust in you. So, with certain writers, Sterling being an example, over the 2 years that we worked together, we kind of had a shorthand that we developed with each other, because we were able to build a relationship of trust between the two of us, and knew that we were aiming for the same direction.
And for Supergirl, did you go back and look at some of the old comics? Did you have an inspiration?
I was told not to look. And I looked anyway. My biggest inspiration for Supergirl really was trying to, after talking to Sterling, trying to find that balance between having her be, because our approach was to present her as just this normal girl who suddenly had these powers and this responsibility that she didn't ask for, but was trying to live up to. And that was a lot of the drama that we built into this series. You know, she was constantly questioning her place. She was constantly questioning whether or not she was doing the right thing. She was being hounded by Kat in the press. You know, she was being, you know, subtly tormented by Superwoman. You know, she was having to deal with her mother being on her back suddenly after being gone. Thinking she was dead, and now Allura's back and running New Krypton, and closing herself off emotionally because she's dealing with the loss of her husband. And there were so many moments in our run that resonated so personally to me from an emotional standpoint. The scene where Zor-El gets killed and Kara's cradling him and crying, like I've, not to go into details, but I've experienced that very same thing, and I know Sterling has. I know that was a key catalyst to him writing that scene, was dealing with his own father's passing. So and Allura's, Kara's relationship with Allura and trying to reconcile that. I've had to deal with stuff like that with members of my own family. And the thing that sold me initially on working on the book was reading Sterling's first script, which ended up being the script for issue 34, which it impressed me so much that I was like, but my wife was like, you have to read this. This is so good. So he immediately had my trust, and I wanted him to be able to trust me to deliver whatever he put down on the page.
What do you like about the character?
I like that she doesn't give up. That she makes mistakes. She may not always want to own them, but she makes mistakes, but she never gives up. That's the biggest thing. She's a good kid. She's smart and she's funny when she wants to be. And I think that, in spite of, just speaking specifically of what we did, like in spite of all the trauma and fairly recent trauma that she had gone through, the fact that she wanted to live up to this ideal, not just the ideal that, that Clark laid out before her, but the ideals that her father laid out before her. She was trying to live up to, being a part of the House of El. And I think that in subsequent years, there have been like peaks and valleys on those themes. I think that Tom King really kind of stepped in and said, hey, I'm going to right the ship a little bit. I wasn't a huge fan of what they did with the New 52 version. At the same time, you could see them slowly trying to make changes to kind of get her back to where we left her. And I kind of like what they're trying to do with her in the current books. I have to see where it goes. I mean, I know what I would like to do. Like the writer in me knows what I would like to do, especially with her and Power Girl. I have a very specific idea of what you could do with with that dynamic and that relationship. But I'm not the writer, so.
You mentioned during your panel that you were doing some of your own stuff.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners and our viewers about that?
Absolutely. So I just finished a series that'll be out from Dark Horse. I'm working with Scott Snyder. It's called Dudley Datsun and the Forever Machine. It's a YA adventure about a 16-year-old kid who inherits a watch that allows him to travel through space and time, and he teams up with a talking dog named Daedalus. And they have to protect the watch from a 5,000-year-old conspiracy. So I'm doing that, and for the last 5 years, I've been working with Ahoy Comics on a series called The Wrong Earth, which is written by Tom Peyer, speaking of Legion of Superheroes. And he also wrote Hourman and Adventures of Superman and everything else, and he was one of the original Vertigo editors. And it's a series about two versions of the same, urban vigilante, Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, who at first end up on each other's Earths, but are now in the current series, they've teamed up and they've ended up on a third universe that is not their own, and they're trying to get back to their original universes. It's actually really fascinating because when we were conceiving this series, I was actually on vacation in Japan, and dragonflies are not just everywhere, they're like ubiquitous, but they permeate like Japanese culture. So I was telling Tom, we were like bouncing around ideas of what kind of characters they would be, and I was telling Tom, dragonflies in Japanese culture, they represent nobility and grace. And he's like, oh, really? Because in European culture, dragonflies are called emissaries of the devil. So that was like, okay, now we have our heroes. Now we have our dichotomy between the two characters. So, we built everything from that.
This is such a big question, but now that I'm sitting and talking to an artist, I've been trying to figure out the answer. I'm sure everyone has done this.
Right.
But the question I've been trying to answer for myself is, what is art? A lot of people, have different opinions and ideas about that. I've been trying to do a personal study on that. So I guess, in your opinion, if you had to answer the question,
right.
It's a huge question.
It is a huge question.
But if you had to answer and respond to the question, what is art? What do you think you might say?
Art is expression. Art is emotional expression. It is the non-verbal tool of communication that binds the entire world together, because we all speak different languages, but we can all recognize the same imagery if we're shown it without words. And that is the greatest way that you could express yourself without having to open your mouth or even write a single letter, is just draw something. And that is art. That is emotional expression.
McGurk! I love
Not
typing.
mess with my Google Docs, Meeksy. Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira.
I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is Lena Luthor, Boardroom or Ballroom, because her outfit,
She looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
No.
Helen Slater here. It's so fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
Yeah!